it was actually when the UFC was just starting out.
Oh, okay.
I had 3 fights in that space.
Wow.
But I think I had my first one was when I was 17 years old.
What is the impact of sport on yourself?
Competing and these kind of sports do help you learn skills on stress management, because there's nothing more stressful than a guy trying to choke you out. How you respond to that in real time says a lot about you. I was a therapist. I spent 5 years actually dealing with people with PTSD, brain injury, autoimmune dysfunctions. And so working with people who were really broken, and in business, I can tell you now, people are on that edge every day. Neurophysics is a movement-based therapy. It's essentially, if you think about it, if you look at a computer program, right? You debug it, you put the code through a bugging tool, and you fix up the code, right? The human body is not that much different.
At what stage you say, yes, I want to create a Salesforce practice?
Just before Veltio, I was working for a lot of tier 1 software vendors, right? I think I was at IBM at the time, and I was a terrible employee because I always challenged stuff, and my bosses I'd always give me a hard time. But what I saw was I just didn't like how a lot of tier 1 companies ran. I think the main thing for me is bureaucracy. I was never good with, right? And there was always bureaucracy in large enterprises, right? So we wanted to start a business that was very centered on culture. I did a startup in the construction industry, and I lost all my money.
Really? Wow.
It was a great failure. And and literally I had, not only did I lose, by then I'd been working in technology for 10 years. So lost everything I'd made those 10 years, and I was still behind. I remember it was about 250 grand. I remember the number, right? So at 30 years old.
What was the main learning from this fail experience?
Main learning is the biggest Achilles heel for any great salesperson is they think they can do everything. The learning of going through a real failure and losing your money, right, does change you. And I remember like those years at Tibco, I made more money in my previous 10 years because not because I was smarter, but just because my mindset totally changed through going through that loss. And it made me approach selling very differently.
In acquisition of like Salesforce practice and like consulting practice, in general, it's all about the people. It's like the people and people's knowledge and the culture of the company. So I guess it's a real challenge to build this transition. Creating this cultural aspect is very key to make sure like the process is smooth at the end.
Well, when you look at an acquisition as a seller, often sellers are only motivated by obviously making the most money from the acquisition, right? But really the more important thing for me that I look at is how does this acquisition do good for the goodwill that you've built in the business, not just how much you get from the acquisition. And that's really important. And even in the Salesforce ecosystem, right? We've seen a lot of acquisitions of a lot of companies. Some have been good. Many have failed.
What was the main benefit you felt on yourself to take this step back?
The main benefit. I wanted to apply everything I'd learned in dealing with people's health when they were at their worst health outcome. I wanted to take all that and then transition it back into a space of high performance. So how do we build a company where well-being as a holistic principle is integrated to the fabric of
I've heard about the framework that is really special. I think it's like quite unique compared to the other Salesforce practice. Can you just like give us an overview of what it is?
But essentially, if you think about how most companies have been run in the past, they've been very much linear and hierarchical in their governance and management structure. At 8SQUAD, we wanted to break that apart and make it decentralized and not linearly hierarchical, but hierarchical in the sense of how natural systems in nature work.
Right.
And so because complex adaptive systems as a philosophy is something that neurophysics is very anchored in.
Okay.
And so my whole thought process was, if systems in nature can adapt and operate in the way that they do, which is infinitely scalable, why can't companies operate that way? But I don't agree with 100% remote working from home. Because as humans, our natural state to communicate is physically. We have to be in physical proximity. A lot of communication gets lost through digital media.
Do you feel like artificial intelligence is as big as like the internet as a revolution? Or
yeah, I think it's right up there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, look, I do definitely think it's as big, if not bigger, than some of its, predecessor disruptive technologies, right? I think it has the potential to really change how we do stuff. It's still early days. But I think like anything, if you're not part of the experiment as the experiment evolves, you kind of get left behind. And I want to be in the fog. And working my way through the fog so that when I come out the other side, I can sprint, rather than be waiting on the other side of that fog until the fog clears.
Hello everyone, today I'm with Frank Cuiuli, the founder and CEO of 8SQUAD, one of the leading partner in the Salesforce ecosystem. So it seems like a very interesting human with a lot of different aspects, including like the Salesforce and innovation side, but also like the wellness and like the mind side. So it will be very interesting. Thank you, Frank, for being here. For the people that don't know you already, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm the CEO of 8SQUAD. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem since 2009. Did a startup back then, which we sold. Bluewolf bought us back then, and then Bluewolf sold to IBM. And then I took some time out of the ecosystem, doing something totally different in the health space for a while, and then came back in and launched 8SQUAD in 2019, just before COVID. So it was a lot of fun.
So you started your journey as a sales function when you just like graduated, so could you tell us like how did everything started? Were you working in the tech industry as a salesperson?
So well, it depends how far back you want to go. So I have been in the tech industry a long time, since my early 20s. And I did come through the sales function of the tech industry. So I was a seller. I worked I worked in retail tech. I worked in distribution. Then I finally made my way over to the software industry. And I was, an account executive for different tier 1 software companies. And that included, I worked for Oracle, IBM, company Tibco, which was an integration specialist. So I've always been a seller.
And how did you get this interest for selling? Like, what was your first thought to orientate yourself in this way?
It happened by accident, to be honest, Arthur. Before this industry, I was my profession was martial arts. I had schools. I used to compete professionally, and that life led me down a few little rabbit holes, and needless to say, I had to make some life decisions. And I think I was 20, and I met a gentleman who owned a computer store. And because when you're teaching, I had schools, and so I was always interacting with people and having to teach, which kind of naturally makes you a good communicator, and you kind of get to read people. So it kind of naturally led me to selling. And the guy offered me a job to sell computers. Back then it was PCs. and I didn't even know what a PC was. And I made the transition into that career at that point.
Were you already handy with computers?
No, mate, I knew nothing about them.
Okay.
I failed a computer course, which was at Computer Power, which was all about mainframe. Mate, that just wasn't me.
Yeah.
And it was funny because when the gentleman asked me, did I know anything about computers and PCs? I knew nothing.
Yeah.
So he just liked the fact that, I could sell and that I could communicate.
Yeah.
And he gave me an opportunity.
Wow, that's a great way of trusting someone. And I guess but at the end, the result is pretty positive, I suppose.
Well, yeah. Look, Joseph Hayek was my first employer in tech.
Okay.
And I respect the man because he took a chance on me, right?
Yeah.
I failed my first 3 computer jobs, right? Because I was just learning about what this stuff was. But I guess having been a fighter, you get knocked to the canvas a lot and you got to get back up, right? And so that, gave me the tenacity to just keep persisting.
Yeah.
And I knew how to learn. That was one of my skills. I understood the art of learning.
Yeah.
And so I definitely had to learn fast.
Okay.
So yeah.
And what kind of fighting were you doing when you were a professional?
Wow, back then I was mixed across a number of different disciplines. So I was fighting in full contact karate.
Okay.
I was fighting in Thai boxing.
Okay.
And kickboxing.
Yeah.
So mainly stand up. And I had titles in. I had a world ISKA championship in full contact karate, which I won the middleweight division. I had a few Australian kind of titles around kickboxing, but it was a long time ago.
So you were living from that?
I was, yeah.
Okay, wow, that must be impressive. And you decided to also teach people and own your school.
So back then there wasn't a lot of money in fighting itself, but it gave you a reputation which helped if you had schools. Really I made my money with my schools.
Yeah.
I had 2 schools. We had, probably just over 150 odd students across
that's a lot.
them. And that was my life.
Yeah. And did you had the chance to travel in foreign country to do
I think my first trip competing was to China when I was 14 years old.
Wow, that must be amazing.
Yeah, I competed. That's where I met Jet Li in China, when I was very young.
Know who is he?
Yeah, he's a great action movie star. Anyway, so I competed in China when I was 14 in their national championships. I went back there when I was 17. I went to Thailand and Hong Kong. So I went to a lot of different places with my art.
And do you think you would have done MMA if you were?
So I did have a few MMA bouts, but back then it wasn't called MMA. It wasn't what the MMA today.
Yeah, like the UFC.
It was it was actually when the UFC was just starting out. So it was just it was really just no rules. And it wasn't a great place to be for a young bloke. But I had 3 fights in that space.
Wow.
But I think I had my first one was when I was 17 years old. My next one was I was mid-20s, and then I came out of retirement and had another one when I was about 30. And I shouldn't have been doing that stuff.
Wow. And so now, do you still exercise or train to keep your mind, or what's your view on that?
So I've gone back into competing.
Wow.
So I switched to jiu-jitsu a few years ago.
Okay.
I always wanted to do grappling. And actually a few of my losses in no rules were to jiu-jitsu stylist. And I was always intrigued, but it was such a different art I could never dedicate myself to.
Okay.
So 2 years back, I made the decision. I made the switch. Became a student again, and I've been competing in BJJ since.
Oh wow! So and I feel it's very popular among tech people.
Very
like Mark Zuckerberg.
He's big in it now, and there's a lot of there's a lot of tech bros who love their BJJ. even in the when I'm talking to people in the Salesforce
Yeah.
industry, there's a lot of people who train, and it's quite a popular sport.
Yeah, that seems to be is something that I've spoke with some friend about trying. Maybe in the future I will be keen to try, but I can really see like the fact of exercising the morning is very key for your mind. It's what's your view on that as someone that run a Salesforce practice? How like do you feel the impact? What is the impact of sport on yourself?
Look, there's many layers to it,
Yeah,
right? So for me, I want to be careful in how I say it because there's no silver bullet, right? And
yeah.
it's not just one thing,
Oh,
but
okay.
competing
Yeah.
and these kind of sports do help you learn skills on stress management
Mm.
because there's nothing more stressful than a guy trying to choke you out.
Oh, yeah.
And how you respond to that in real time
Yeah.
says a lot about you,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But, you know, just because you might be good at BJJ doesn't
Yeah.
always mean it translates into other parts of life,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it definitely, my martial arts background has taught me the art of discipline, and
Okay.
that's probably the most important thing,
Yeah.
right? And exercise has a lot of positive physiological effects
Yeah.
on mind and being able to deal with stress, right?
Yeah.
And so certainly it's been a big help there.
Yeah, that's a very interesting part. And I think I saw that you study something related to neuropsychology as well.
Yeah.
How did you included that in your journey between like sales
Mm,
function,
yeah,
entrepreneurship,
yeah.
and
So again, when in my early years of training,
yeah.
because I trained very traditional Eastern arts,
Okay.
I was exposed a lot to Eastern medicine,
Okay.
right? And so every school holidays I had, I worked in the acupuncture clinic of
Yeah.
my master at the time.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about the medicines and the approach to health.
Yeah.
Um,
When we
then
just when we say Eastern, which country is it? Is it more like
mainly
okay.
Chinese, yeah, at that time,
Okay.
right? Then when we sold Veltio to Bluewolf,
Okay.
I kind of, I was always fascinated with the philosophy of, holistic health, right?
Okay.
But holistic health has taken a lot of turns where there's a lot of people who embellish
Okay.
these principles and philosophies,
Yeah.
and I wanted to bring a more scientific lens
Okay.
to the conversation. So I actually went back to study,
Yeah.
and I found a gentleman who was teaching a form of therapy anchored in neurophysics, and that's the intersection of neuroscience and physics
Okay.
as science. And Ken had come up with a methodology which was an applied therapy, which is neurophysics therapy,
Yeah.
and I learned a lot about bringing together the science of well-being,
Yeah.
but with a real scientific anchor rather than just
Okay.
a philosophy. Yeah.
So, like, what action do you do to be like healthy in your mind in
It's
a
more
way?
than that, mate. It's really understanding how the human body
Yeah.
works, in that how the central nervous system really impacts all other
Okay.
areas of, like, hormones,
Yeah.
you know, different uh, neurotransmitters,
Okay.
where again you could be um, could impact like your overall health and well-being and how you respond to things in the environment, right? So
Okay.
it was, yeah, I was a therapist. I spent 5 years actually dealing with people with PTSD,
Okay.
brain injury, autoimmune dysfunctions. And so working with people who were really broken
Yeah.
physically and mentally, and applying these scientific therapeutic approaches
Yeah.
really taught me about um, the things that lead people to
Okay.
breaking.
Okay.
And in business, I can tell you now,
Yeah.
people are on that edge every day.
Okay. But like when you were working as a therapist, were you helping people through uh what my question is, what was the way to help people? Was it through communicating
No,
and
it was dealing with them very physically,
okay.
through like neurophysics is a movement based therapy.
Okay.
It's essentially, if you think about it, if you look at a computer program, right?
Yeah.
You debug it. You put the code through a bugging tool,
Okay.
and you fix up the code, right?
Yeah.
The human body is not that much different. We
Okay.
use movement
Yeah.
to look at where are the bugs in the autonomic nervous system,
Okay, that's very
and
interesting.
then to actually reprogram.
Okay.
Which you hear this term neuroplasticity,
Okay. Yeah.
right? Which is the brain making new connections
Okay.
through the nervous system, central nervous system, which the brain is part of.
Okay.
Literally reprogramming how their mind body communicates to get through whatever symptoms or problems that they're experiencing.
So basically, it's like doing movements that help you to understand where your body is not working correctly, and by like implementing specific movement, you can fix that, and this will help the patient minds. Is that correct?
And body, yeah.
And
so
body.
An example would be in PTSD.
Okay.
PTSD shows up as a psychological kind of experience and dysfunction.
Okay.
But through movement, we're able to reduce the symptoms of PTSD significantly.
Wow.
Right? Equally, when someone experienced a brain injury, which is a very physical thing, I had a young Lebanese patient who had a great journey. He came to Australia when we started working with him, was in a wheelchair, was told he'd never walk again. Through the same process, 2 months later, he took his first steps. Today, he's out of a wheelchair. This guy has run marathons. He lives a totally independent life just by integrating these principles into the way he's gone about rehabilitation.
Okay.
And he was told he was told by his doctors then that not only would he never get out of a wheelchair, but he'd need a full-time carer, right? And so the transformation in his life was quite significant.
Yeah.
Again, applying the same therapeutic approach.
Yeah.
One was a very physical experience. One was a more psychological experience. Both same outcome in terms of patient gets better.
Oh, okay. I see. That's very interesting. And this was before or after
This was
Vultio?
before 8SQUAD. So after Vultio, before 8SQUAD.
Okay. So basically, if I try to summarize, you work like in sales as a sales function in technology for a while in like different of like companies such as Oracle and then you decided to create Vultio.
Yep.
And after that, you started to work as a therapist.
Yeah.
Wow. And when you built Vultio, which was a practice based on like sales automation, and like in general,
it was a Salesforce practice.
Yeah. Salesforce practice. Yep. How did you come up to create Vultio? Like, at what stage you say, yes, I want to create a Salesforce practice?
Yeah. So it was interesting. By then, at the point which just before Vultio, I was working for a lot of tier 1 software vendors, right? I think I was at IBM at the time, and I was a terrible employee because I always challenged stuff, and my bosses I'd always give them a hard time.
Yeah.
But what I saw was I just didn't like how a lot of tier 1 companies ran. I was always whinging about
like in terms of. Like it's too vertical?
I picked on everything.
Okay.
So, I think the main thing for me is bureaucracy I was never good with, right?
Yeah.
And there was always bureaucracy in large enterprises, right?
Yeah.
So we wanted to start a business that was very centered on culture.
Okay.
That was disruptive because back then, remember, this was a time of transition from these enterprise systems to these SaaS systems. And SaaS was very new, right?
Yeah.
So Salesforce was very new.
Yeah.
Social technology, mobile phones like Apple just released, like this, all this stuff was new. And we saw an opportunity that we could bring all this stuff together in a way that changes how business operates. And so myself and 2 co-founders, we said, you know what? We've had enough of, corporate life. Let's go do something disruptive. And then we launched Vultio.
Wow. But were you familiar with like the Salesforce technology?
So I wasn't. One of the co-founders, Jamie Pride, actually was he had left Salesforce at that point, but he was one of the original Salesforce Asia Pac guys. He built their services business in Asia Pac.
Yeah.
So he knew Salesforce very well.
Yeah.
He said, look, guys, Salesforce is a great platform. We should maybe look at that. And it was really his decision to go down the Salesforce path.
And you, like as a sales function, you were like familiar with cloud technology in general. So
and the company that I was with, actually before IBM, when I was at Tibco, we used Salesforce. So I understood the platform, and then I worked at Oracle in their Siebel business for selling CRM. So I understood CRM.
Okay.
And so I went, okay, well, understand CRM, use Salesforce, makes sense.
It's not too far.
So, I know how to sell this stuff. Let's go.
Yeah. And so how did that feel when you started like on your like personal life side? Because it's a big deal to create your first business. How did you handle?
That wasn't my first. So
that was not the first?
No. Before that, I had a massive failure. I when I was 30, I stepped out of the IT industry. In fact, that back then I was working for another startup who was from Denmark, and they had a CRM platform built on Lotus Notes.
I haven't heard
right? No, you wouldn't have heard of that. And so we were launching that in Australia. And anyway, when I left that business, I did a startup in the construction industry. And I lost all my money.
Really? Wow.
It was a great failure. And and literally I had not only did I lose, by then I'd been working in technology for 10 years. So lost everything I'd made those 10 years. And I was still behind. I remember it was about 250 grand. I remember the number, right? So at 30 years old, I think I was 31 when I folded that. Starting negative, right?
Wow. And what was the main learning from this fail experience?
Main learning is the biggest Achilles heel for any great salesperson is they think they can do everything. And I took on a challenge which I got my butt kicked. Funny enough, the project that brought me down actually went on to make a lot of money. But I was in a world of sharks that I didn't even know I was swimming in a shark tank. And long story short, lost it all. Went back into tech. And that's actually when I worked for Tibco. I came back in and worked for Tibco. And, the learning of going through a real failure and losing your money, right, does change you. And I remember like those years at Tibco, I made more money in my previous 10 years because not because I was smarter, but just because my mindset totally changed through going through that loss. And it made me approach selling very differently.
That must be very interesting. I guess it's like a real failure that teach you so much. And like you cannot. There is only one way to experience it.
Only one way. You know what? You can't teach the lessons you get from the direct experience. You just can't. You have to have the direct experience.
And so if we go back to the Salesforce practice, as it was not the first business that you launched, what was the mindset behind launching this new business? Like, I guess it was like you were aware of the backlog of failure, not failure, but like the mistake that you made previously, and you were more experienced with a different vision on how you will kickstart the project.
Look, we took a very lean startup approach to Veltio. We all put in a little bit of money and really operated lean. Took no money out of the business. Only kind of each partner rolled in at those early stages in different ways. And Con Giorgio, who was also one of the other co-founders, was the first in kind of establishing the business. And I think I came next, and then Jamie. And but we were all working on the business together at the time. And Con and I both were strong sellers. And Jamie knew delivery better than anyone. So we had the combination of skills, I guess, to really launch Veltio. And Veltio back then grew quick. We got to 30 people, I think, pretty quickly. And at that point, I think 2 years in, we were looking at raising money to grow, and Bluewolf actually found us through one of Jamie's mutual contacts who are on the Bluewolf board, and said, look, we're looking at coming into Australia. And we had spoken to a few other acquirers at the time, but Bluewolf culturally was a really good fit. And so we did the deal with Bluewolf, and then Jamie and Con went off and did other things and kept forging forward. I stayed in the business and managed the transition. And even when Bluewolf bought us, we went from 30 to 80 people.
Wow, that must be crazy.
Almost like in 12 months.
How does that work when you are about to work on an acquisition or like to sell your own business? Like, what is the process behind? I guess, like you explained, it was through a conversation at first, but I guess it can be a very different process. But what was your how did it happen for you, for example?
It was all new to me. I've never sold a business till then. You learn about how valuations work, and you learn about due diligence and how that process works, and the contract negotiation.
What is due diligence?
Well, due diligence is when the buyer really wants to lift the hood, right, and go, okay, what's really under the covers here? What do you do good? What do you do bad? Because any buyer just needs to understand how they're going to integrate this business successfully, and what are the risks, and so that due diligence process really tries to uncover everything that could bring a deal unstuck. And it is a good way of then aligning to how you're going to integrate this business with the new owner. And look, with Bluewolf, I think it was a really well done process. I stayed on for the year and did the integration, and had a lot of fun. And I think culturally, the business was really well aligned, and I think the evidence is in the growth after the acquisition. Right, and all the people that had worked for Veltio all stayed on and grew with that acquisition, and actually most of them even survived when Bluewolf sold to IBM.
Oh, wow, that's
a lot
great.
of them even went into that and kind of thrived.
Because I find it very interesting, like that in acquisition of like Salesforce practice and like consulting practice in general, it's all about the people at the end. Like, and
that's what you're buying. You're buying people,
It's not like the technology platform, or it's like the people and people's knowledge and the culture of the company. So I guess it's a real challenge to build this transition, because like in specific case, like you can see like practice that are bought and everyone leave. And I guess like creating this cultural aspect is very key to make sure like the process is smooth at the end.
Well, when you look at an acquisition as a seller, often sellers are only motivated by obviously making the most money from the acquisition, right? But really, the more important thing for me that I look at is, how does this acquisition do good for the goodwill that you've built in the business, not just how much you get from the acquisition. And that's really important. And even in the Salesforce ecosystem, right? We've seen a lot of acquisitions of a lot of companies. Some have been good. Many have failed. Right? And I judge failure very simply. How long were those teams that were acquired, with the new owner of the business, right? And you've seen some pretty monumental failures, right? And I think that's when you've just got a misalignment, right, of the business that was bought with the business who bought it, and what role that business now plays in the greater vision, right? When you get it right, it's great, and it's great for the people because it expands people's opportunities. It's great for customers because now they've got an expanded set of capabilities and longevity with relationships, and it's great for shareholders, right? But when done poorly, I mean, it's a disaster.
And so, like, after like this first Salesforce practice, you took like years to
It was about
study.
5 years.
Yeah.
5 years between leaving the industry,
Yeah.
going into my health space. I'd started studying a little bit before
Yeah.
I left. While I was at Bluewolf, I started my study.
Yeah.
But it was about a 5-year gap, and then I came back in 2019, and launched again.
What was it? What was the main benefit you felt on yourself to take this step back? Like.
Well, the main benefit. I wanted to apply everything I'd learned in dealing with people's health
Okay.
when they were at their worst health outcome.
Yeah.
I wanted to take all that and then transition it back into a space of high performance. So how do we build a company where well-being as a holistic principle is integrated to the fabric of the company?
Okay.
Because when you look at it, a lot of companies all talk about well-being.
Yeah.
I call bullshit on a lot of them because, to be honest, I think it's just a tick box, right? That, we can tick the box. I've got yoga, I've got healthy meals, and it looks good. I've got meditation rooms, fantastic. No one knows how to fucking use it, right?
Yeah.
So for me, a lot of companies, tick boxes, but don't really integrate it to the fabric of how they operate.
Yeah.
And that was the opportunity. And I think 8SQUAD was built on a few premises, and that's one. And so our high performance program that we've really worked on over the past 5 years really shows up in every aspect of how we make decisions, how we look at our people, how we deal with our people when they're falling off the performance cliff, when projects are going red, when people are burning out. So it really is the underpinning of everything we do.
So do you feel like this 5 years of taking a step back and studying like
neurophysics,
neurophysics has been a key component to build like you have a framework at 8SQUAD. Is all these 5 years were key?
100%.
Okay.
Everything I had done in that 5 years has contributed to how we've designed this business.
And because I've heard about the framework that is really special, I think it's like quite unique compared to the other Salesforce practice. Can you just like give us an overview of what it is?
So if you think about the framework, firstly, there's the system of governance and how you run a business.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the first part of the framework, because and we can go down a different rabbit hole and why this is important right now, especially with the impact of AI.
Okay.
Right? But essentially, if you think about how most companies have been run in the past, they've been very much linear and hierarchical in their governance and management structure. At 8SQUAD, we wanted to break that apart and make it decentralized and not linearly hierarchical, but hierarchical in the sense of how natural systems in nature work. Right? And so because complex adaptive systems as a philosophy is something that neurophysics is very anchored in. And so my whole thought process was, if systems in nature can adapt and operate in the way that they do, which is infinitely scalable, why can't companies operate that way? And so we looked at that when we designed our company, right? So that's the first part of the framework. Because if we're going to succeed, we need decisions to be decentralized so that people can make decisions who are closest to the problem, not having to force a decision back up a linear tree to someone who's furthest removed from the problem, right? And so that was the whole principle, That way we should be able to adapt faster to the changing conditions. And let me tell you, right? We launched this business just before COVID-19. Like literally, we launched June 2019, COVID 2020, hit in 2020 at full scale, and that changed everything. So I think the design played a very important role in just how we adapted through those times.
Okay.
Right. Then underpinning that is people, right?
Yeah.
Again, our high performance model has to be embedded in every decision we make.
Okay.
And so that's also part of the how do we deal with problems in the business?
Okay.
How do we deal with projects? How do we deal with non-performance?
Yeah.
Now, when people hear me say these things, sometimes go, oh, it sounds a bit, kumbaya woo-woo. It's actually not. Like if you think about all great high performance teams have really structured, rigorous,
Okay.
programs, and we've adopted that same principle, right? Of a Premier League soccer team, right? In how we look at high performance and our people. So there's a lot of discipline that we expect that goes into how we operate and how our people operate on a day-to-day.
So if I try to summarize like 8SQUAD, so basically you have some modules of decision where people are quite autonomous and able to take decision because they are quite close. They experience the issue and they have a better understanding. So they have like a space of decision that allows them to not report all the way up to a decision leader maker that will be far away from the understanding the problem.
Correct.
Okay. So this is a key part, and like the second part is that I understand probably less is like about the people, like the high performance on the people. It's basically you have internal program that helps the people to perform at their best and having like an understanding of what is not working well if something is not working well. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And essentially it's also the filter that we use on who suits 8SQUAD.
Okay.
Not everyone copes well
Yeah.
with a constant lens over their performance.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like it.
Yeah.
The people who are very growth oriented that want to keep pushing themselves, they love it.
Yeah.
And so often it also acts as a way to filter out our employees on who's culturally aligned to the business and who's not.
Okay.
So it acts as a two-way thing, right?
Yeah. Oh, so that's interesting. I think it's a very good culture for what we call like working from home or being like probably distant.
I hate the working from home thing.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I like everyone talks about working from home, and so we've got to let me qualify that statement, right? Working from home has a lot of great benefits. And we promote working from home. But I don't agree with 100% remote working from home.
Okay.
Because as humans, our natural state to communicate is physically. Like we have to be in physical proximity. A lot of communication gets lost through digital medium.
Yeah, I think it's 100% valid.
Right. And so for me, there's got to be a healthy balance between in-person work where people are together solving problems together. When you think about, empathy maps and things like this, well, how can you be empathetic to something you haven't experienced in the space in which it's experienced? Right. So, you need to be working on site with our customers, in the office with your teams. But at the same time, having the flexibility to have some days at home is highly valuable. And so that's kind of how I see things.
Yeah, I agree. You will always be more indulgent with your teammate if you have a coffee with him like every Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
And I can really experience that. I think it's a good thing. Like it makes you love people you work with.
Yeah.
But what I meant was like during COVID time where everyone was like spread in their home, it was probably a very good system to
people were stressed, right? Like people were struggling mentally. They were stressed. They were under a lot of pressure, you know. And it did help us look at that problem differently. and experiment with different things based on kind of the experience I had in the health space. And
Yeah.
I think we coped with that period pretty well. I think what we're going through now is a renormalization of what does
Yeah.
life beyond COVID look like. I think a lot of people still stuck in kind of COVID mentality,
Yeah.
and I think we're getting through that now
Yeah.
and getting back to whatever the next normal looks like, and
Yeah.
that's kind of a mix of things.
And do you feel like what's the main difference between Vulteo and 8SQUAD? Like, is it this framework?
Vulteo was version 1,
Okay.
where we started to explore some of these concepts, and we tested some things. We got some things right. We got a lot of things wrong.
Yeah.
8SQUAD really helped us go back to the table, clean sheet of paper, and go, okay, like how do we do this again, but do it better?
Yeah.
And it helped us extend the experiment.
Yeah. Wow, it's very interesting. And do you feel like, are you still running like the business that are more focused on mental health aside of 8SQUAD, or you are fully focused on, because Pivot Me, I think.
Pivot Me is my vehicle for that intellectual property and that constant investigation and evolution, right? 8SQUAD is my job, right? And essentially we apply all those learnings of Pivot Me into 8SQUAD. But I continue my kind of research into that space. And want to keep evolving that.
And do you think in the future you could sort of like work as a consultant for other business to implement this kind of like systems?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we're definitely exploring that at 8SQUAD, right? How we can potentially productize some of these services, because we've learned them firsthand, and now how can we help our customers, right? Especially customers that want to go down the kind of decentralized organizational pathways. We can definitely help. Customers who are really interested in people high performance. We're starting to expand our own internal academy. And have some of our customers experience that. And how we do it.
Interesting.
Right? And to be honest, my people and culture team can go into any of our customers' business and show them the gaps, because we've had to wrestle with those things ourselves. So we've definitely got a very strong thought leadership body of knowledge that we want to try extend to customers. We just haven't figured out what's the right way to do that.
Yeah. It's almost like at the end of the Salesforce project, you train the customer, and it could be like another module that is like design thinking, or
I think it actually even starts before the project, because I think the success of the project is very much determined by the people in the customer's environment and their ability to change, to adopt change, and to be open to the feedback loops during the change process. Now, when people are not coping mentally and physically with their job that they're doing today, and then we try and introduce a project to change how they do their job,
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And people are going to be resistant. And so applying some of these high performance philosophies to the people before they undergo the change project, I think is actually even more valuable than waiting till after.
Yeah, that must be. So it's like at the very first step that you need to. Wow, that's interesting. And do you feel like as a software platform, like would you be interested to develop like product and platform in the future? Because I guess
So we're doing that now. So inside the container of 8SQUAD, we're now looking at AI in how can we augment all the knowledge that I have, that my high performance team have. How can AI and the operating platforms such as Salesforce actually give us more predictable, proactive insights? So we can actually get to these performance moments sooner, easier, and faster to help our people. And so we're actually building some of these agents at the moment.
For 8SQUAD.
For 8SQUAD. And because ultimately, if I can't do it for myself, I really shouldn't be doing it for my customers. So we're looking at doing that inside as our own competitive advantage,
Yeah.
but certainly something that we can replicate for our
Oh,
customers.
that's very interesting. I think that's very valuable as well to do it for yourself first to understand like
Yeah.
the limitation and the benefit before delivering to
Yeah.
the customer. I've seen like something interesting. It was Klarna. It's like a bank in
Klarna, yeah.
Sweden base. And basically what they did is they tried to remove all the software because to create like a huge knowledge base, basically. Because their saying is that like AI is impacting um, could be could be delivered in a better way if there is not all the SaaS platform that are holding like the knowledge in siloed. And I think this is where data cloud is quite interesting as a way to centralize the data in a way.
Look, again, you can't kind of you can't reduce things to that level of simplicity sometimes, right? Like operating system, like operating platforms, SaaS platforms have business logic and automation inherent in them, right? And that makes sense because they're the right platforms to execute certain business processes, right? AI is part of the process of especially with generative, right, coming up and using the data that's inherent in all these platforms to generate new insight, right? And AI is evolving in terms of what it can do. So in terms of an end state, I think it's way too early to tell. But it's great to see these companies experimenting with these different models. You know, for us, you know, these, whether it be Salesforce or any other SaaS platform, there's a lot of inherent value in the processes that they're automating and orchestrating, and AI needs to be part of that. But certainly, like the way we're looking at AI is more about how can it really augment the human experience and then release our people and talent to do higher order work. That's kind of how we're looking at it.
I think like Salesforce had an interesting sentence. It's improve employee productivity to deliver better customer experience. And
exactly.
I think it's it really makes sense. Like when you hear that sentence, and so do you feel like you will? Do you feel like artificial intelligence is as big as like the internet as a revolution, or where would you put it on the scale?
Yeah, I think it's right up there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, look, I do definitely think it's as big, if not bigger, than some of its, you know, predecessor disruptive technologies, right? I think it has the potential to really change how we do stuff. It's still early days. But I think you, like anything, if you're not part of the experiment as the experiment evolves, you kind of get left behind. And you know, I want to be in the fog. And working my way through the fog so that when I come out the other side, I can sprint, you know, rather than be waiting on the other side of that fog until the fog clears, right? And that's kind of our philosophy.
Like the advantage is that you run a technology business, so it's like,
well, it can be an advantage and a disadvantage.
Oh, really?
You know, as I say, the plumber's pipes are always full of crap, right? So sometimes, you know, you forget about yourself as a company, but we're trying to really test on ourselves first.
I think it's very important, and I fully agree. Like, as a Salesforce partner, like the technology that you implement for customers should be implemented as well internally to see like the horizon and until where it can go. I think it's very interesting to and it's not everyone that is doing that. Like I guess. And so another key aspect of it is how do you upskill people that are working with you on topics like AI, um, I think it's very important like this notion of upskilling people so that they can become like fluent with AI in general. Do you have any like how do we call that, like any initiative, or
Yeah.
is it something that you would like to do?
No, we're doing that now. Like, how we use AI internally to augment every single person's function in the business,
Yeah,
so they have a direct experience of the technology,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
We're leaning in very hard there.
yeah,
How we look at some of the agents that we're kind of building for us internally, so that our people experience
yeah,
the degree of change and how it manifests in their jobs, and
yeah.
so that how they can think about the problem differently for their customer.
Mm,
So for me, AI is something that you have to have a direct experience with in order to mature your thinking about it.
yeah, yeah,
And I think, yeah, so for us, um yeah, we're definitely trying to build our thought leadership through direct
yeah,
experience and challenging these things ourselves
yeah,
to see what's possible, to see where the gaps are,
yeah.
and so that we can pass it on to our customers.
Okay, that makes sense. And do you think you would like to explore other platform and in the future deliver AI to customer from technology probably outside of like Salesforce?
You kind of have to.
Yeah,
AI, from an enterprise architecture perspective, you kind of have to be platform agnostic, um,
yeah,
to really provide the best solution to customer.
yeah,
Certainly, Agentforce and Salesforce's platform is central,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
we believe in it and we see the vision for it. But I think there are going to be certain AI solutions that might not suit certain
yeah,
customers
yeah,
in different parts of their business. So you need breadth across Google,
yeah,
GCP,
yeah, yeah,
AWS, right? Some of these, OpenAI,
yeah,
we're
yeah,
looking at that as a platform and what it can do, and these different AI LLMs and agentic platforms that are kind of evolving.
yeah.
You have to be across them.
So like 8SQUAD in 5 years will be very impacted positively, but will evolve as a
Yeah,
business with AI.
100%.
Yeah, that will be interesting to see.
Yeah, well, we're looking. I'm right in the middle of our next 5-year plan, and
Yeah.
the business I envisage in 5 years is very different to the business you see today.
Ah, okay. So how does that work? Doing that, is that something like yearly you do or monthly or?
Look, you should be reviewing your strategy almost every month,
Yeah.
right? You set a target, and then it's kind of like an adventure game,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You go a bit left here, a bit right there, and
Yeah.
but you always got to reassess: is the target still the right target?
Okay. Yeah.
So we kind of have these, whilst you can never predict it, especially at the moment we're going to be in 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
You set a directional position,
Yeah.
and then every 12 months you have a 12-month cycle
Okay.
on how
Yeah.
how did you go towards that position in the 12 months.
Yeah.
Has it changed your
Okay.
idea of the destination? If so, adjust it.
Yeah.
And then within the 12 months you got your kind of cycles even within that, saying, right,
Wow.
great, what did we achieve, what did we
Yeah.
learn,
Yeah.
does it change anything that we want to do in the next 12
Yeah.
months, right? So you kind of look at these
Yeah.
mini, micro, and macro scale kind of
Yeah.
processes.
It's a bit like driving a boat.
It
Like.
is, mate. It is. Yeah, are we on track? We're still heading. Where's the stars, right? Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that must be interesting. And I think like maybe like to finalize like the interview, what could we wish you on the personal side and like for 8SQUAD in like this five next year?
Oh man. Look, I think for 8SQUAD,
Yeah.
in the next 5 years, definitely I'd like to see a business which has kind of diversified some of our service offerings for our customers.
Yeah.
That really, the vision of human-centered digital transformation doesn't change.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the end of the day, everything we do is about the human experience
Yeah.
and the enrichment of the human experience.
Yeah.
The services and products we deliver to achieve
Yeah.
that will change, and I'd like to see really expansion on that in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
I would definitely like to see a business which is started to head into international markets in the next
Okay.
5 years. I think for me, Australian companies keep selling to Europeans and American companies. Why not be the Australian company buying American and European
that would
companies.
be
I
a
think
first.
that would
Almost.
be. I don't think it'd be the first, but
Really?
it definitely there's not enough of
Yeah.
Australian businesses doing that.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see that.
Yeah. Like Atlassian, Canva.
Yeah,
I
look,
think,
they're great stories of
Yeah.
of Australian companies growing internationally. Personally, I've done a lot of startups.
Yeah.
0 to kind of 30 people, 50 people, now 100 people.
Yeah.
I think for me personally, I'd like to see myself see it through to how do I get to 1,000 people? That for me personally is a different challenge, and
That's very interesting. I've heard like I think it was like VC that were, or business angel, that were talking about like entrepreneurship and running a business. And I've often heard that there is people that are specialized in 0 to 100.
Yep.
And then after it's someone else that will do like 100 to 10,000.
Yep.
That's very interesting.
There's startup, and then there's scale up, and then there's then beyond scale up, there's like where sustainable enterprise, right?
Okay, yeah.
I'm not that person. Sustainable, like I'm not the guy that comes in running a 5,000 person business, optimize, which really when you're optimizing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The scale up challenge though, where you go from 100 to 1,000, 2,000, whatever, is interesting. And for me, I definitely want to. That's my area of growth.
Yeah.
I've been the startup guy, and I've done that well, and I think that's something I'm very familiar with. And while I could do it again, I'd like to set my sights on scale up. I think that's now an interesting challenge because I want to actually show that the method we've created can scale.
Oh yeah, that would be.
So that's my passion, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about passion aligned with commercial interests, right? My passion is I know this thing has worked in a startup environment, and I know how to apply it to a startup.
Yeah.
Now I want to show that we can scale up, and use that philosophy to scale.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope to do in the next 5 years.
All right. Thank you so much. It was great to.
Thank you, man. Nice to meet you. Yeah,
Nice
appreciate it.